Hello and greetings. My name is Captain Pete and this is Captain Pete's Boat Review. We're here in North Lake Tahoe at Carnelian Bay at the famous Sierra Boat Company, where they restore and preserve old wooden classic boats, the treasures of the past, in that era where the wooden boats were king on Lake Tahoe. We're going to take a tour today and we're going to go in and meet Herb Hall, the owner of Sierra Boat Company, and we're going to find out how they do this. And you'll learn a lot about boats and you may just fall in love with one of these boats for yourself. So come with us and we'll see how it's all done. How you doing, Herb?
How you doing, Pete?
Thank you. Great to be here. One of the most beautiful places on planet Earth.
It sure is.
What great weather we have today.
Yeah, it's perfect.
I almost hate to go inside, but I'm excited to go in there and see the tour of how you restore and preserve some of these boats.
Yeah.
Tell me what got you into this in the first place.
Oh boy, I've spent all my summers here on Lake Tahoe. We have a long history on Lake Tahoe, and my dad, one of his good friends, owned this company, and they got to talking actually back in 1976, and he put the deal together and really as an investment. My dad was a stockbroker. And so I was in college and thought, well, that would be a fun summer job. I'm going to come up here and do that for the summer. Well, I just fell in love with it. It was just a perfect match for me and what I like to do and my skill sets. And so I graduated from college and moved up here in 1978 and have been here ever since. Lake Tahoe loves wooden boats, and we are the caretakers of those boats. And for me, one of the big satisfactions is we're preserving history here. We are taking boats that were built 80 years ago, 70 years ago, and we're keeping them well maintained or restoring them back to new, and we're watching our clients really enjoying them on this beautiful lake. You know, the last wooden boats were really built in 1968. Chris Craft Boat Company, Century Boat Company built their last wooden boats. And then, you know, from then on, the fiberglass era really started in the mid-60s. And in most parts of the country, people pretty much discarded their wooden boats and got into fiberglass. Tahoe is unique in that the people up here really revered wooden boats. And as I tell people, we didn't get into the wooden boat business. We just never got out of the wooden boat business. We're a 65-year-old company. We were the Century Boat dealer, which of course those boats were originally wooden boats. And we had just always had people around here that knew how to work on this kind of stuff. Probably by 1980, we realized we were the only people that were doing this kind of stuff anymore. None of the companies on the rest of the lake were doing it. There were very few other people in the country that were doing this kind of work. And we kind of became known early on as the company that did this kind of work.
Well, people come from all over the world, I guess, to look at your boats.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. Yeah. I just sold a boat to Italy that I had bought from Italy and brought here and was here for 18 years, and it just went back to the same place it was originally bought from. We are what's considered a full-service marina, and it's not just about the shops. Of course, that's a major part of what we do. But we have a 120 slip marina. We're on our fuel dock, so we do fuel services. We can store over 400 boats in our building. We have a marine store. We do brokerage services. We're a one-stop shop for anything you could possibly need for your boat. When a client comes to us, they love the fact that we do everything soup to nuts and they don't have to go anywhere else. They can leave the boat with us and have us just take care of everything.
Well, speaking of not going anywhere else, where would you want to be other than heaven? And you are
Right,
here in heaven.
right.
I can't wait to go see what's going on inside the shop.
Let's go
Yeah.
take a look.
How you doing? My name is Captain Pete.
Hello, Captain Pete.
Okay.
Pete Lynn. Nice to meet
Yeah, tell us what you got here. You know, what you're doing and what are the steps? I thought you put the planks on first. I never saw this before.
you. Yeah, so this is a inner skin. This is a two-part bottom, basically. So we have this on the inside, and then we put a bladder bottom, kind of a rubberized membrane, and then we put the planking on the outside. So this just gives us more torsional rigidity and a nice membrane to seal the bottom.
Well, how long does it take you to do something like this? Or how do you determine what you need in the beginning? You know, who determines whether you replace the whole hull or just do one plank?
That depends on the condition of the boat. This boat was full of rot, so we had to put a new keel in, new stem. We replaced probably 75% of the bottom frames. And then we went ahead, and now we're putting the new bottom on. Most of the time you don't have to go that far. Typically a project lasts anywhere from a month to 6 months, let's say. And there's a lot of variables in there, the size of the boat, the condition, the kind of boat, you know, whether it's American or Italian, or every boat's a little bit different.
Well, roughly how many types of boats are there in the wooden category? And you know, I guess it's so many to even try to remember, huh?
Right. Well, at one time I understood there was at least 400 different boat manufacturers, and now there's probably 20 or 30 that we deal with on a semi-regular basis. Like, I've been doing this for 40 years now.
So you're a master craftsman then?
I wouldn't say that.
No.
But I've been doing it for a long time. So I've worked on the same boat, let's say every 10 years for different customers over the years, because one person will sell it, and then the next guy will bring the boat back 2 or 3 or 10 years later, and we'll do it again and again and again. So I've seen the same boats year after year after year. This is a Century Resorter. It's I believe it's like late 50s. When it's a full restoration like this, we like to start with the bottom, because without a good bottom, you don't really have a good boat. So we start with the bottom, make sure that's ship shape, make sure all the running gear is right, the shafts, the logs, the rudders, all the important things that are in the water. We want to make sure there's no rot, make sure the bottoms are strong, make sure, you know, everything is ship shape. That's kind of where the term comes from. Once we do that, then we start focusing on aesthetics, the sides, the decks, the upholstery. As far as the framing is typically either oak or mahogany. And generally we just want a good quality mahogany. So if we were doing something like a Century, traditionally they're built with African mahogany. Chris Crafts are built with Philippine mahogany. Hacker Crafts are built with Honduras mahogany. So we try to match what's already there, and we try to stick with what was there originally. You know, every boat's a little bit different. So every boat has different characteristics, riding characteristics, engine performance characteristics. Certain boats are not as valuable as other ones, so then you might not want to put as much money into it because they don't have the value. Every boat has a different construction. I remember Dick Clark back in the old days pioneering fiberglass bottoms back in the, I think it was early 70s, something like that. And then we kind of got away from that because we realized those bottoms weren't as good. And we've come to this point where we have this new, we call it a double layered bladder bottom, where we use a marine plywood on the inside. We saturate it with penetrating epoxy, we seal it with the rubberized coating, and then we put the planks on the outside. So it can expand and contract like a traditional bottom.
Well, it's really amazing how these boats, you know, have held up over the years and how strong they are. Now, as far as the engine compartment is concerned, do you modify engines, or how do you determine what size engine to put in here or build the structure to hold them?
Traditionally, we like to keep the original engine in because they're designed for a certain size engine. We can repower them. Some people like, instead of a 6-cylinder engine, sometimes they want a little more horsepower, so we can put a V8 in it. But as a general rule, we like to keep the original engines in them. And typically they can run anywhere from, let's say, 95 horsepower to one like this might be 185 horsepower. Sierra boats always carried on the tradition of preserving and bringing new wooden boats to Lake Tahoe. It's pretty much a working museum. People appreciate craftsmanship. And we have all levels of people working here. And we have just an amazing crew here that does everything from fiberglass boats to engine work to upholstery to wooden construction. Everybody enjoys coming in here, whether they're excited about boats or not. They just like seeing the process. And it's fun just to educate people, because most people don't even really know what a wood boat is. You know, when you and I grew up, there were wooden boats around, but nowadays there aren't that many wood boats anymore. But when you come to Tahoe, or especially come here to Sierra Boat Company, you see lots of wood boats. And we try to preserve them, keep them going, bring them back. and look for customers that want to participate in this program.
Okay, we're here now in the engine room. This is where everything is done in here, primarily when it comes to the mechanics behind it.
Right. Right now, we have 2 boats in here that are getting engines put into them. This Cadillac is going into the Sodas. We have a V8 that's going back into this boat. But yeah, this is where we tend to do all our heavy mechanical work. We do some engine building in here, and so it's one of the smaller shops. They don't need quite as much space as some of the other shops have.
What kind of boat is this again?
This is a Belmont built in Fresno, California. Actually, they're still in business. They built a lot of boats in the post-war period, right up through the 60s. They were kind of what we call California flat bottom hot rod boats. They were generally very lightly built with big power, and they were designed to go fast, basically. You know, compared to a Chris Craft or a Garwood or anything like that, they were pretty simply built, but the whole premise was to have an inexpensive boat that you could go fast in.
Looks like a Basotis on the outside here to some degree.
Same basic construction. If we look at Brokey here, this is about a 1939 Garwood 19-footer. Garwood built pretty robust boats, and they were fairly heavy for their given size. And this boat originally would have had about a 95-horse flathead Chrysler. And at this altitude, 6,000 feet, where Lake Tahoe is, you lose about 25% of your power at this altitude. So if people are really going to enjoy these boats at this altitude, they need more power than they came with stock, or it'll take them forever to get across this big lake. So this boat has been retrofitted with a fairly modern Chevrolet V8 motor. It's about 185 horsepower, and now that boat will get up in plane properly and do 35 miles an hour, and it's just a much more pleasant boat to use with that extra power.
So what do you do to help strengthen the holding area for the engine? How do you modify it?
The boats as built were pretty well built to begin with, and what a lot of people don't realize is the original engines, even though they were low horsepower, were quite heavy. And so the manufacturers already put a fair amount of structure into them. But you know, when we get into the boat, obviously we have to really assess the condition of that boat. Sometimes once you get the old motor out, you realize that the engine stringers are these main ribs that run on the inside of the boat. You find out they're not in very good condition, and sometimes we'll add things like, you know, extra bracing to make sure that's all sturdy and can take the extra horsepower. The one thing we really don't like to do with any boat is to over modify them to take new power. Because at heart, we're trying to preserve these boats in their original historical context. Whenever we put a different motor in, a more modern motor in, we do it in such a way that we haven't cut the boat up. We could always put that original motor back in if somebody wanted to bring it back to completely original. So you have to be a little bit clever in your engineering. One of the things we do, and we've done in this boat, it's a V8 engine which generally has twin exhausts, and will wire the exhausts together into a single pipe. So from all appearances, it has the original single exhaust like it would have had with the 6-cylinder. A lot of people will cut another hole in the transom for twin exhausts, and it not only looks wrong, but now they've cut the boat up. So if somebody wanted to go back to the original engine, they're going to have to put a brand new plank in the boat. So we try to avoid doing those sorts of things. And of course, you're going to upgrade electrical systems. A lot of times you get in these boats, you'd be amazed how many of these boats still have wiring that dates back to the 30s, and it's just falling apart. So you're going to upgrade that. The original wiring was cloth-covered wiring, and they actually reproduce cloth-covered wiring. So in keeping with the historical way the boat was done, we put cloth wiring back in, right connectors on the ends, and so there's a lot of detail that goes into doing these mechanical systems. You really want to do it in a very clean way, and in a way that's in keeping with the historical way they're done.
That you said you had a lot of mechanical and electrical experience. Where did you get that?
I just learned from guys that have been doing this stuff for years, and I learned all the little tricks and just kind of learned a lot of it on the job. And that's pretty much how a lot of these people around here that we employ, how they've learned. It's kind of a long apprenticeship program. The one thing people don't realize when you get into these older boats is mechanically they're very, very simple. Simple carburation and ignition systems, very easy to work on. There's not a lot to go wrong with them. You get into a modern boat with, now everything has fuel injection and all that, and I'll tell you, when something goes wrong, it really goes wrong, and it can take hours and hours to diagnose it and fix it. And if it breaks, the module that goes out is $1,000. Well, most of this stuff can be fixed with basic tools, and they aren't complicated at all. And even the drivetrain, you have very simple transmissions that are uncomplicated that virtually last forever. You have a simple drive shaft. You're not dealing with the complexities of a modern inboard-outboard drive that are very high maintenance. So you can go for multiple seasons on these things. You can probably go a good 5-6 years with nothing more than an annual oil change on these things before you ever have to do any kind of work at all.
What Sierra Boat Company is famous for up here is restoration and preservation, but everything's got to be just right when you're dealing with upholstery in a boat in particular.
Sierra Boat hires me to come up and look at what they need done. If it's not correct, we try to put our heads together and find out what's original. Maybe from some of the boats he has in storage is a good information. So it's fun. It's a lot of stuff once you start getting into it. Because of the nature of wood, it doesn't last forever. So like on the bottom of these seat risers, they're rotten. So it'll be stuff that we'll bring to the customer and let them know now's the time to take care of anything that's decayed.
Our whole premise here is, but we do a lot of boats that go to boat shows, and it's got to be exactly as it came out of the factory. And Rod's really made a study of what the original materials were. A lot of these older boats had leather, and he has found companies that reproduce the original leather in the same patterns and colors as the original. Some of the more expensive boats actually had pocketed coil springs in the seat bottoms, and he will restore those springs and retile the springs, which is a lot of work in itself. And then even gets down to the fact that a lot of this upholstery was installed with tacks rather than staples. This is a later boat, and it's all put together with stainless steel staples. But back really up into the mid-50s, they were still using tacks. And when you get into a boat show and they start scrutinizing these things, they'll look to see if they've been put together with staples or tacks, and that can be the difference between a first place boat or a second place boat. It's wooden varnish has to be right, mechanically has to be right, but the upholstery is a big chunk of the details too, and so we depend on him to get those details. This boat was built in 1998 by the Hacker Boat Company. They're up in Silver Bay, New York, upstate New York. The Hacker name is one of the oldest boat companies in the country. They actually started in the mid-teens. But there was a gentleman up there that just resurrected the name. And so we call these new Hackers. They're based on 1930s designs. We refer to them as replicas. But the big difference between this boat and an original, say 1930 Hacker, is the traditional construction on all of these boats is they were pretty much just planks screwed onto frames, and they used a combination of silicon bronze or brass screws. This boat is essentially what we call glued construction, and what they do is the framework is very much like traditional framework, but they In addition, much like this bottom we were doing, they're going to sheet that framework with marine plywood, and then they're going to glue the planking on top of that, and they're generally fastened together with stainless steel screws. There's no gaps between the seams. All the traditional boats you see around here have a little bit of seam movement, a little bit of opening between the seams. Well, this looks like a solid sheet, and there's no gaps in between because it's completely glued underneath and it can't move. So it makes for a very, very strong boat. Ultimately, this boat is going to be less maintenance. I'm not going to say maintenance free, but it's going to be a lot less maintenance than a vintage boat because it's not moving. A lot of what really creates maintenance on these boats is those planks moving back and forth all the time, and you'll get varnish peeling at the seams and that sort of thing. And you're not going to have as much of that with this boat. And when you have all these caulk seams, even though this boat's been glued up, it is older at this point, and those seams have moved a little bit. So what happens is the caulking, the planks shrink, and the caulking gets stretched and it'll crack. And the only way to really fix it properly is to reef that caulking out of the seams, put fresh caulking in, and then we'll varnish the boat, we'll restripe it. These boats typically, traditionally always had white stripes, and so we'll come back with a striping tool and restripe those seams so they look like proper white seams. This is a Canadian boat manufacturer by the name of Clarion. They build a lot of boats that are what I call traditional design. This is it's not necessarily a replica of a vintage boat, but it has a lot of characteristics about it that are typical of vintage designs going back to the 30s. Same kind of construction as the Hacker. It's all epoxy glued together. And in spite of all that, we've just replaced the entire deck on this boat because it just, a lot of it is the tough climate of Tahoe. It's very, very dry up here, and a lot of this wood really suffers up here. It doesn't necessarily rot, but it dries out and it moves around. And this deck was just really beyond our ability to really make it nice anymore. We had stripped it a number of times to bare wood and sanded it and refastened it, and it just had gotten beyond what we could really do. So we replaced the deck. We're building up coats of varnish on the deck right now. The sides are just getting a fresh coat of paint on all the cabin tops and everything. Basically everything on the boat is just getting freshened up with varnish. This is a great entertaining boat. A lot of room inside. You can put about a dozen people in it. It's got a bar inside, and so it's a perfect boat for that sort of purpose.
Wow.
We do a lot of paint and varnish, generally on the bottom sides, and you will see some boats that have painted hull sides, and sometimes even the decks can be painted also. But here we're dealing with varnish. On the decks of this boat, we stripped off all the old varnish all the way down to bare wood here. So then we sand the wood through the courses of different sandpapers, and we'll restain the wood, and then we'll do anywhere from about 8 to 10 buildups of varnish on there, and sanding in between every coat to get that good adhesion. We're going to use just a regular paint roller and roll it on there real nice, and then we tip it out with generally using a foam brush now.
So the work you did on this, it had been neglected for a long period of time?
Yeah, and you can even see on the sides here, we didn't strip the sides. They just wanted to do a couple coats of varnish. I don't think a lot of people are going from fiberglass boats to wood boats these days. A lot of the people that are into it have been into it for a long time.
Okay.
That's what they like, and that's what they want.
Takes a special type of person, I imagine, to do this.
Totally. And if they don't know, once you start telling them about the maintenance and and how much work it is to keep up with a wooden boat. You know, that kind of might shy some people away.
This is the woodworking room. We have various different varieties of mahogany sorted and ready to go for a lot of these jobs. We have our saws in here and our surface planers and all that. Most of the boats that come in here are in here for the initial stages of major woodworking. This is an interesting little boat. It's only 16 feet long. It's built in Italy. Italy has an amazing tradition of boat building. They continued to build wooden boats well past the time that the Americans did. They built some really amazing stuff during the 60s. And this was a small company that built a lot of race boats. And one of our clients was in Italy and saw this and thought it'd be a great project to do. It is going to get a Maserati racing engine in it. Eventually, we haven't seen the motor yet, so that's coming. And right now we've stripped all the varnish off of it and we're sanding it down and getting it ready for varnish. Some unique construction you don't see very often. This boat is actually riveted. They used copper rivets. It is a plywood panel side on this that's riveted to the framing, which is very, very strong construction. But what's unique is they have left the rivet heads exposed. So when this boat gets varnished and you have all those exposed rivet heads, it's a really neat look. Most of the time, like on the deck of this boat, these boats, the fasteners are countersunk into the plank, and then there's a wood plug that goes over the top of that, which it's sanded flush with the rest of the hull. But this is just, only the Italians would do something like this. Actually, some of the really early American race boats also did this sort of construction.
How fast will this boat go?
It's probably originally a 50-mile-an-hour boat, I would say.
Wow.
This is a 1941 28.5-foot garwood. They only built 2 of these, and this may be the only one in existence. It's a very, very rare boat. And we're doing, again, a complete replacement bottom on this boat. Actually, the boat was in very, very good shape when we got into it. It was leaking. But once we got all the planking off of it and really inspected the frames and everything, actually the frames were in remarkably good condition. And did a lot of repairs, replaced a few frames. So what we're doing here is this is the first layer that's going to go down. This is plywood, but it's been cut on the diagonal. This is mimicking the original construction. Again, our whole premise here is preserving history and doing it exactly as the factory did. So the bottoms of these boats were, you can call them a composite bottom, because basically what they did is they put an inner bottom in. Originally they put canvas down, usually with some bedding compound, and then they put the planks on top, and of course everything is screwed together. And really our upgrade is we're taking, rather than putting solid stock diagonal planking in, we're now using marine plywood. It's stronger, it's all epoxy sealed, it'll hold up much, much better. So that has now all been put in place on the boat. The next layer, rather than canvas, now we're using a cloth with a urethane rubber material. It is now our membrane, our waterproof membrane. We sometimes call it a bladder bottom, but I like to use the term membrane bottom. So that once that membrane is on there, the boat is essentially, you've got a completely waterproof bottom. One of the rarest boats around, it's got a V12 Scripps engine, which is a very special marine engine. They're about 315 horsepower. And I would say when this boat, right now we're just doing a bottom on it, and we're going to put some varnish on it. Probably next year the owner is going to have us do more work on it. When this boat gets all of its restoration work done, it's easy a $500,000 boat.
Wow. It looks pretty big and real heavy too.
It is.
Yeah.
And very nice riding. If you look at it, it has a fairly deep bottom on it, almost as deep as a modern boat would have. So on a big rough lake like Lake Tahoe, this boat rides like a dream. We were talking about upholstery and the springs and the seat bottoms. These have coil springs that are probably a foot long under the seats. So when you hit a bump, you just sink down into the seats. It's like riding in a big Cadillac.
How nice. All right, we're back here at one of the first projects we were looking at, and we're doing what is called,
Yeah, this is the bladder bottom.
the bladder bottom.
Yeah, so we put the plywood, the marine plywood down first, then we put the rubberized fiber on top.
And this is before the planks go on.
And then after we do that, we'll draw our lines on the boat. The old planks are all right there, and we use those kind of as templates, and then we'll cut new planks.
Ah,
And one thing I didn't mention before is, you always talked about, what are people looking for when they buy a boat? Well, there are different styles. There's like the utility style boat, which has like a doghouse motor box and you can walk around it.
Oh, yeah.
Typically it holds about 5 people. There's a single cockpit boat that only holds 2 people, a double cockpit boat. Some of them have engine hatches, and then other ones have a third cockpit. So, and typically the ones with cockpit style are more expensive and harder to find because everybody buys those. You've heard of the term barrel back? Back of a lot of boats is actually the full barrel. And a lot of them are like that, and those are worth a lot more money. Just because they have really nice lines.
this is a bladder, but it's bomb-proof, you say, or
Yeah, bulletproof.
bulletproof?
Yeah, so that's kind of a motorcycle term, but really what we do is we put the marine plywood on the inside, saturated with penetrating epoxy. Then we put this is a fabric with the rubberized coating. And then we cut that down, and then we put the planking on top of it. That way it's more of a traditional bottom. The planks can expand and contract. So when you just take a normal wooden boat and put it in the water, it'll sink. It's like a wine barrel. It could take 2 days or 2 weeks to swell up.
Exactly.
But with the bladder bottom, we can actually drop them right in the water and actually use them the next day.
Wow.
What they did originally, instead of using a bladder bottom, they put the inner planking down first, a 1/4-inch mahogany inner planking. Then they put a sheet of canvas on, which is supposed to do the same thing. And then they put the planking on top of that. The problem with that is the canvas, after 10 or 20 years, disintegrated, so there's no canvas left. So this rubberized bottom will last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So they'll never have to worry about it again.
How long has this process been in existence?
We've been using it for about 7 or 8 years now, I'd say.
So it's relatively new in the scene here of boat
Exactly.
reconstruction,
Exactly.
preservation.
Exactly.
Can you put this on a trailer, for instance, anywhere for that matter?
Yeah.
But it's quite toxic, I imagine, to deal with.
Oh, actually, you know what they do? They use this on mobile homes.
Ah,
Like in trailer parks, they'll use this same material. And you can also use it on a deck of a boat where you're walking around, but they'll put sand on it and then a couple coats of paint. And it's really, I believe it's ground up golf balls is what they've told me it is. Just ground up rubber, but it makes for a bulletproof material.
wow. Can you see this here? Yeah, it's beautiful. This is where they store all your boats for the winter, right?
Yeah, there's winter storage.
Anything that's really historic or old. I remember seeing these here up in Sebago Lake in Maine, that front.
But this boat was delivered to Tahoe from Garwood's to Hobetser's.
And how old is this? How many years?
This is a 39.
Wow,
Something
1939.
like that. See it right in there.
To keep one of these up, they had to really be on top of it, didn't they?
Yeah. This gets varnished every couple years. The guy that owns this really takes care of it. This is a cool boat here. This is probably a 1924. It was the University of California, Berkeley crew team, the crew for rowing.
Ah, there it was their boat.
It was their boat. They used it in the bay, and they'd follow their rowers.
Gee, What happened to it, or why is it up here?
This a customer's stored here forever. He passed away, and then it was just sold.
If there are boats for sale here, and you have a showroom, so evidently if I wanted to buy a boat, they're always there, you know, if I want one. Well, look at this little one over here. I can't believe it. This is
That one's mine.
Oh, is it? Is it really?
It is. Some of the wood on this boat was from the Spruce Goose airplane.
I'll be darned, I've been by that.
People don't see them racked like this usually, you know.
I just don't know how you get them in here, but wow. You know, to get them in here, it has to be really methodical. And you say it's a labor-intensive program.
So what we do, we lift them out of the water, bring in the larger boat, which would be the bottom, and then we have these rack wheels here. We build a frame, we set the boat on blocks, then we put the side pipes on, we get the top bars and make sure everything's nice and tight, and then we lift our top boat, which are usually the smaller boats. We lift it up, set it on top, and then we manually push these to all these areas.
Okay, this is what's called the Chris Craft Cobra, which is called that because of what reason?
You know, I'm not sure why they call it that, but it's a racing runabout hull basically, and they put this fin on it. And they come in two different sizes, like a 21 and an 18 or 19. They're just, I don't know if there's that many left around. You know, you see them a little bit at the shows.
I don't think I've ever seen one before, ever.
Yeah.
This is the first.
So these are cool. Just they always grab everybody's eyes, you know, with the fin.
Sure do.
Kind of almost like the years they were trying to influence automobiles, maybe to get people into boating more or something, you know, if they were into cars.
If I had the time and the money, I'd collect every boat and every old vehicle I could. You can cover just about everything. Your services are pretty broad.
We're very unique. You know, there's a lot of companies out there that do wooden boat restoration. Most of those shops are much smaller than us. They're typically 2-3 man shops. And most of what you'll find when you start looking for restorers, they're pretty much wooden varnish guys. They are generally subbing that boat out to a mechanical shop to have their mechanical work done. And a lot of times the places they're taking them to are, they're car guys, and they don't necessarily understand the differences between automotive stuff and marine engines. So we're very fortunate. Of course, we're a big operation that does a lot of things, but it's rare to have the mechanical under the same roof as the wooden varnish guys, and we can, especially when you're talking about restoration work, we have great coordination between the two different departments. Certain things have to happen in a certain sequence, and if you've got your mechanics talking to your finishers, you can make sure all those things happen at the right time.
These particular boats shine like glass. I hope you enjoyed the tour here at Sierra Boat Company in North Lake Tahoe in Carnelian Bay, California, where they restore and preserve some of the most beautiful old wooden boats that were ever made. Come on up here when you get a chance and enjoy the lake, enjoy the scenery, meet the guys, take a tour, and you never know, you might fall in love with one of these boats and buy one for yourself. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you another time in one of our episodes of Captain Pete's Boat Review.